Okay. Can everybody hear me? I'm going to be talking in English because I'm slightly more comfortable in English than most of the other languages I speak. Thanks for the introduction, and I'm glad that the content optimization talk has been before mine, so I don't actually have to talk about that. Short introduction. Hello, I'm Igor. I work for a company named Brainsware, that is me. I consult in other companies where I rent myself out to support infrastructure. I'm a member of the Apache Software Foundation, where I mostly work on projects that are somehow related to infrastructure, such as HTTPD and traffic server. And as of this week, I am now with Puppet Labs. I mean, not the company itself, but with the project where I work on a couple of modules. So I think you can see a certain theme there. I'm doing lots of infrastructure and infrastructure-related code, and that's exactly the kind of point of view that I bring to a project when we try to scale it. I've been working for companies that are huge, international, with millions of customers. I've been working with companies that are tiny, but have hundreds of developers, and I've always hit pretty much the same problems. So let's talk about what I'm not going to talk about, which is the performance bit we've already skipped, because it is an essential part of scalability. When you try to scale something out, there are usually two approaches. One of them is you put it on bigger hardware, and that usually goes pretty well, especially if your application starts out scaling with little hardware. Otherwise, you're going to hit physical limits pretty soon, and one way or the other, you will hit a financial limit, though that will not be a wall, it will usually be a hole. And what we try to do is we try to scale things out. We try to scale it out horizontally, put it on as many cheap machines as possible out there in the cloud we didn't really care about. So in theory, all this scaling business has become really, really easy in the last couple of years. And the main reason is because we've replaced the bottleneck in operations. This guy, and it's usually a guy, who's sitting on the server because he has room, and these days we don't really care about one person having root in a single box, because we have hundreds or thousands of boxes, and we've managed to turn computers from something that used to look like this only a couple of decades ago into something that looks like this. We've made it at a level where it's completely commoditized. I can purchase the cloud for a couple of hours that is specially set up to crack passwords. And it's awesome, really. You should appreciate that. The problem is that, or at least in my experience, and I invite everyone to share their experiences and interrupt me, because that's usually something I'm more used to. I work in operations, we work interrupt-based. I do trainings, teachings, that's usually also interrupt-based. So if you have any questions, just shout out. In my experience in the enterprise field is usually lagging behind. And so I'm going to be sharing my pain. This is therapy for me, okay? Okay, so why is scaling still so hard? Oh, this is UTF-8, by the way. This is awesome. I love this. I've been talking about UTF-8 today because I'm so glad that my name is spelled correctly. This is supposed to be a broken heart. So whenever you see this symbol, this is a broken heart. Yeah? This is my relationship to DevOps. Okay, so one of the reasons, one of the first things I usually encounter when we get a new project and we have to put it out there, it has to be as soon as possible. And that's usually so we get a call from somebody we maybe even don't know, and they tell us this project needs to be online in 2 weeks. Can you make it by Friday? We have a demo. Awesome. Who are you? What project? I've never heard of it. And then we try to install the thing, and it breaks apart. Because in the setup that we have, we spread it over a couple of machines, databases somewhere else. It's got a load balance, it's got SSL, uploading, and all that stuff. All the URLs are different. Everything, every single thing falls apart. So, but yeah, it works on the developer's machine. And the problem with this is relatively simply, we try to get away from that. We would love to just take the developer's machine and put it in the data center, replicate it a couple of 100,000 times, but that doesn't work. What we want to do is, we want the software and every single of its parts to be easily installable, and that's usually the first hurdle. The second thing is logging. And if you work in operations, who here works in operations? Okay, so wow, that's just 2 people. Wow. Okay, so to everyone else here, the log is our best friend. When something breaks at 3 o'clock in the morning, and we get a call, we look into the log to find out what is breaking, what is losing us money, customers. So that's going to be the first source. And if all we can find are some strange tracebacks, and then we have to go dig through code at 3 o'clock in the morning, that's not helpful. That's a broken heart symbol right there. Okay? Another thing that I encounter, and I've been guilty of this myself, is we reinvent the wheel, and we've reinvented a couple of wheels along the way. One of them was we fixed SSL to make it work better on mobile clients. Instead of helping the upcoming standard, we just did it ourselves. We did our own hack. We deployed our own version of OpenSSL. But the other pain point really is right as it shows there, my most favorite protocol, HTTP. Who here has read the spec or followed the new spec, the upcoming HTTP BIS and HTTP 2.0? Okay, the other question here, who of you develops web applications? No more words, okay? Another thing, and this is not so common in the enterprise field. I'll hurry up. This is not so common in the enterprise field, but with PHP applications, and we have a lot of PHP developers here, when you find something online that says, how do I install it? And it says, chmod 777, I hate you. I hate you, okay? This is, and I invented this is configuration management by 4chan. You don't want 4chan to be your configuration management. This is a broken heart symbol there, okay? And then there's the issue of not caring, you know? It's one thing to just say, it works on my machine, you know, this innocent thing, but it's a completely different mindset where you have, this is a dev, it worked in dev, now it's an ops problem, I don't care, whatever. So this needs fixing, and there is a way. Wow, this works. I'm so glad this works. Okay, so DevOps basically it's not a methodology or anything. It's basically a couple of guys, mostly from operations, doing pitch talks like this, or crying therapy, telling you to bring operations and development as close together as possible. and reap the fruit that we saw by doing that. Okay, and the first thing here that I've introduced into the companies that I work is Vagrant. Who here knows or uses Vagrant? Excellent. If you don't know Vagrant, Vagrant manages virtual machines. It's awesome. I basically created a couple of images for our developers that mostly look like our production servers, and they were set up to have a load balancer with SSL, a valid SSL certificate, 2 application servers and a database, which is the standard set that we used to deploy. So that's the bare minimum. And if your application works there, that's a great step. Now, this has an implication. If you use Vagrant, you need a couple of gigabytes of RAM to do that, to not sit in front of it and just wait for something to happen, but actually do something. So, who has a box with more than 8 gigabyte RAM? It's 2013. Go to your manager and tell them, I'm a developer, I need this. Another thing that I've introduced and it's been picked up, and developers have been running with this, they love it, is Logstash. We collect logs in a development environment with Logstash. So we aggregate all the logs in a giant cluster, and you just click on it. You don't have to log into the server, grab through the stuff. You just click on what you want, and select the range, and it gives you the log. And this has gone actually so far that managers have come to us and said, we want to push this. We want to push this further. We want to standardize logging in our development efforts. So this is a great tool. If you don't use it, please take a look at it. It's awesome. And this was my initial plan. I was going to spread more propaganda about one of my favorite projects, which is Traffic Server. Is awesome. It's a caching proxy. It does SSL termination, and it's blazing fast. You can do like 200 queries per second, relatively cheap hardware. So what you do is, if your application speaks HTTP and uses caching headers correctly, you just strap it in front of it, and then we don't have to ask your application servers anymore. We just ask Traffic Server for like 90% of the content. And finally, automate. I put the Puppet Labs symbol up there because recently I got a new brand. But it doesn't matter if you're using Puppet or Chef or anything. It doesn't really matter what exactly you're using. The most important thing is that operations and development converge towards using the same tools. Because if you do, you get the most power out of them. If in development we do a deployment, and then in order to replicate that deployment in operations, all I have to do is include the same Puppet class on a new node or on 300 new nodes, then I'm going to be a happy admin. Because that's awesome. That's how things should work, in my opinion. The other thing is to use, to also, thanks, I'm going to hurry up. To also use all the tools that your community and your programming environment provides you. So if you're using PHP but you're not using Composer, you should fix that. If you're, for instance, on Debian and you're developing some kind of software but you're not deploying it as .deb, you should fix that. You should change that. And I don't know, every single development environment has their own set of tools. And you should use that. You should use the community standards because that's going to make your life easier. You shouldn't reinvent those. Unless you're working on something really obscure that doesn't have that yet. Then you should start establishing that. And finally, we should share the pain. Because empathy doesn't scale over the distance away from a nature's SMS alert. So if you want to feel responsible as a developer for your application, the best thing you can do for it is do on-call time. So if you dare. And then there's something that goes far beyond all of this. That's that. Because scalability or the scale that we want to reach, that we would like to reach, that everybody talks about, is simply incomprehensible. Like how Google, for instance, how many servers or hard drives Google has. How do you express in words that somebody else can understand? When you run a program at Google, by the time it's finished, one of the hard drives it's been running on has died. How do you express that in words? And that is, by the way, stolen from XKCD's What If, which I recommend for everyone to read and check out. And I also thank you for your question. You can ask questions if you have any in Bosnian, Serbian, Croatian, German, and English. So go ahead.
Have you heard about Docker and what's your opinion on it?
Yes. 1500 years ago, when I started IT, we did. What was it? What we did is privilege separation on a completely different level. We did it on process level. Docker or Linux containers, when that developed, I haven't had time to look into it yet. And frankly, I mean, I'm really excited. I would love to be more excited for Linux to have this thing now. But Solaris, FreeBSD, they've had those things stable for like 10 years now. And I'm really glad it's coming to Linux land now, but I haven't had time to look into it yet. Awesome, I'm so glad there's no questions. I didn't. So the question is what we run our software on, and the answer is it depends. So since I'm doing consulting, I adapt to my clients, but most of my clients use one form or another of Unix, and mostly Linux. Yeah.
Okay, it's working. Yeah. So the question is, I know you're the DevOps guy, but which of the programming languages and platforms is the easiest to set up with Puppet and stuff, or is that just independent?
It's entirely independent, mostly of the programming environment. I've automated PHP within a day. I have a little bit of trouble with Python, but that is not due to the programming language or its environment. It's due to the way that our developers developed the software that we have to deploy. So that's a bit of a pain. But we have Haskell. That was just as easy. So it doesn't really, it doesn't matter. The thing is, in Puppet, what you do is you basically describe what the sandwich looks like that you want to eat. You don't say sudo making a sandwich, you just say, I would like to have this and that, and then you go for a coffee.
Yeah, I have a question. What tools do you recommend for modifying configuration files on the virtual boxes? Like OBS or something
yes,
like that? What are the options?
I mostly use OBS because the developers are so enormously responsive. So whenever I have a problem, because I still can't read that stuff properly, I ask them. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, what you do in Puppet generally is you tell it this is what my config file would look like, but if you're not yet there, I use ODS to set up those boxes that I hand out to my developers. So to prepare them at that level, when there's no Puppet, no Puppet master, nothing, I just use ODS to modify the config files.
Thank you.
Još neko?
Yeah, hi. It's more request than a question. What tools can you recommend for building packages for Debian or CentOS?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry I didn't mention that. Usually I do. A big shout out to Jordan Cecil, who also works on, where is it? There we go. Jordan Cecil now works for Elasticsearch. He did Logstash, he did FPM, which is the Fpm package manager. I use that now for all my packaging efforts, be that Jam or RPM or that, everything. And we have our own repositories where we push software into and then install it.
Ja ne razumem samo, u čemu je ovo predavanje?
It's a therapy session. I'm using the opportunity because usually when operations people do this kind of whining, they do it in front of lots of operations people, and it's an echo chamber. And now I'm doing it in front of loads of developers because that's the people that we usually should be interfacing with, right? And I mean, just the fact that hardly anyone here has read the HTTP spec, but everyone calls himself or herself a web developer, that is sad. Please, please, please fix that. Please.
Wow.
Okay.
Ko je sljedeći? Sad se ih uvijedi danas.